Lost in the massive media coverage of the environmental disaster in the Gulf of Mexico is the worst part of this industrial crime. The killing of 11 men who entrusted their lives to the corporations that put them on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig and guaranteed their safety. You can be horrified by the pictures we bring you of the oil floating on the Gulf. You can feel for the birds. You can feel for the shrimpers. You can feel for the kids who just want to have fun on a clean beach. But you should feel something more for the loved ones of the Deepwater 11. We in the media should never let you forget them. We should make sure that all the corporate executives responsible for these 11 deaths have to see their pictures every day, every night. Shane Roshto was a roustabout, 22 years old. He leaves his wife Natalie and his son. Roy Wyatt Kemp was a derrick hand, 27 years old. Leaves his wife Courtney and 2 daughters. Carl Kleppinger Jr. was a floor hand, a Desert Storm veteran. He leaves his wife Tracy and 1 son. Jason Anderson was a tool pusher. He leaves his wife Shelley and 2 children. Stephen Curtis was an assistant driller. He leaves his wife Nancy, a son, and a daughter. Dewey Revitt was a driller. He leaves his wife Sherry and 2 daughters. Adam Weiss was a floor hand, 24 years old, high school football star. Leaves his girlfriend and family. Blair Manuel was a mud engineer. He leaves his fiancée Melinda and his 3 daughters. Donald Clark was an assistant driller. He leaves his wife Sheila and 4 children. Aaron Dale Burkeen was a crane operator. He helped get other crew members to safety in the minutes after the explosion, but could not get off the rig in time to save his own life. He leaves his wife Rhonda and 2 children. Gordon Jones was a mud engineer. He leaves a son and his pregnant wife, Michelle, who is due to give birth 7 days from now. Just before the explosion, Gordon called Michelle. She told the Los Angeles Times, quote, his last words were, "I love you." 10 minutes later, everything changed. Yes, everything changed. But the executives at BP and Halliburton and Transocean don't know that yet. They think they can get away with ducking blame in congressional hearings and wait for all of us to move on and forget these 11 men. And they think they can admit missteps and keep calling a crime an accident. Not this time, not as long as I can get to a microphone. These corporations and these executives are going to be charged with wrongful death in civil cases, and they are going to settle those cases out of court because they know there is not a jury anywhere in this country who would not find for these 11 men. The only legal questions remaining are, has everything changed enough so that this time they will face criminal charges of manslaughter? And is that what it takes to get the corporations running our oil rigs, our coal mines, to, at long last, find their consciences? For the answer to those questions, let's bring in Mike Papantonio, an environmental lawyer who's leading the class action lawsuits against BP. Mike, clearly there will be wrongful death cases mounted here. It seems to me, am I right in calling it that they won't make it a trial? They will absolutely settle these things. They'll be afraid of any civil jury here.
Lawrence, that's correct. They'll settle some, but I got to tell you something. The problem is, and you pointed out, this company has to be concerned about more than civil problems. They have to be concerned about the criminal aspects of what's happening here. Something happened yesterday that I think is critically important. When Obama forced BP to release the Deepwater video of this catastrophic oil gusher, it became apparent that this company has been lying to the American public and to the federal government from day one. And what's happened is when this video was released, all of a sudden this lie becomes something that they really can't cover up anymore. And here's what I'm trying to say here. Remember when they began their story by saying that this was a minor problem. This was simply going to pass. Day 2, it was 25,000 gallons that was leaking into our Gulf. Day 3, it was 45,000. Now, the important thing about this is it tells you something about the culture of this company. It tells you about something, and when you see a culture like this, inevitably it ends up with criminal problems. Today, we learned that there's about 4 million gallons a day gushing from there. And it didn't just happen. This isn't something that just happened by negligence. One way that this happens is by way of politics, the corporate shield that comes onto the scene. The Lisa Murkowski, who today was saying that this company should not have to pay for the full claim. And what you have to understand is that's part of the denial game that this company's played from day one. When they start a denial game like that, what ends up happening in the end is that it usually spins into criminal problems. Murkowski's a good example. Look, let me just tell you something. You name it. Exxon, Koch Industries, Constellation Energy, $300,000 has spun to politicians like Murkowski to become a sock puppet for this industry so they could get away with virtually anything they wanted. If you look at this story as it develops, it's like kicking over a rotting log and seeing these creepy characters run out from underneath it day after day. The Murkowski types who are nothing more than shills for this industry. Mike, let me
get you to the manslaughter question. I've been chasing this manslaughter question. It's been bothering me from the start here. What is the legal threshold that has to be met to bring a manslaughter case in this instance?
Recklessness to the point that it almost knocks on the edge of intent. Manslaughter, when you see a manslaughter driving incident, it's not that they intended to kill somebody, but they were so reckless. They just had so little attention to what they should have been doing. There was a reckless abandon in the way they approached the issue. That is all over this case. From day one, we started seeing it. Day one, we started hearing stories that at first blush, they were almost implausible. You'd hear a witness call and say, this is a company that drilled deeper than their permit. This is a company that failed to have a fail-safe system in place that's used all over the world. This is a company that knew hours before this thing was before it blew that they had an intrinsic problem in the safety system. This is a company that knew all this and chose to ignore it because to respond would have cost them money. And when you get to the point where there's such reckless abandon, such little care about human life, then you do knock on the door of something like manslaughter. And so let me just tell you something. I used to be a prosecutor. And I got to tell you, if I had the facts of this case in front of me back when I was prosecuting, I would tell you that the chances of success in a real criminal conviction are very high. The problem we have here is we don't throw corporations in prison. The U.S. Supreme Court says we have to treat a corporation like they're a person, but who are we going to take to prison? Are we going to take Tony Hayward, the CEO of this company, who today said that this was a relatively tiny problem, that it's a tiny problem because it was such a small spill in this huge body of water called the Gulf of Mexico? Are we going to put Tony Hayward in prison? The corporate structure is put in a way we can throw a man in prison for robbing a Jiffy store with a gun, but when you get a man with a briefcase who kills people for nothing more than sheer greed, then Mike, we have problems with that, and we have to relive the way we look at corporate America.
Mike, we're going to have to leave it there for today. I appreciate your passion and your insight on this. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.